Hello, I'm Jonathan Colopy from your Y. Welcome to Be Well. We get to have these stimulating conversations to foster a mindful lifestyle of well-being. And our topic today is self-compassion. And I think it's something that I've always been very curious about, and today I will get to learn more. I'm very fortunate to have a returning guest, Dr. Erin Matchmay, leads clinical psychologist at Sharp Healthcare's Adolescent Intensive Outpatient Program. So I can see, as you were sharing with me earlier, it's been a busy day, but I appreciate you, Dr. Matchmay, making the time to join us.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
So it's interesting. Earlier today, I have the opportunity once a week to facilitate a mindful meditation class. And today I have these cards. And at the end of the session, I pull out these different cards to be able to pull an intention. So it's self-care. And I did it not thinking about that we were going to be having this conversation about self-compassion. So I look forward to you helping me understand the distinction of really what is self-compassion.
Absolutely. I also love that you have those cards. That's fantastic. How relevant. So self-compassion really is thinking about how we treat ourselves and making sure we do that with warmth, kindness, and understanding. Really recognizing that all of us are going to experience difficulty, pain, and even sometimes suffering. And it really has to do with the mindset that we approach that with. So instead of judging or criticizing ourselves, really thinking about how we can, respond to ourselves compassionately.
That is a radical idea. And the reason why I say that is, most of us are so much in our heads. And I'm going to play on these cards one more time because I pulled a particular card at the end of the session, and it was on kindness.
Nice.
And you just spoke to it a second ago. And the quote behind it is, "What if being kind to yourself really could change everything?"
Yes.
And to your point, that's really what we're wanting to do as an aspect of self-compassion. So tell me why it's so important that we learn how to practice this.
Absolutely. So practicing kindness to yourself really helps with reducing stress and anxiety, decreasing any kind of depression, and increasing our overall resilience to being able to manage when we do have stressors or challenges come up. It can increase our self-esteem, our overall life satisfaction, and it can even help us improve some of the relationships in our lives. So practicing kindness and self-compassion has a lot of real benefits.
Tremendous. How do we get there? You're selling me on the need for it. You've shown me the benefits of it. So how do we actually develop, cultivate this whole concept of self-compassion?
Okay, so I think one of the important things to know is there's really three main components of self-compassion. If you're thinking about it based on the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who's one of the pioneers in self-compassion research, and there's a lot of great resources out there that she has created. But those three main components are actually self-kindness, which you mentioned, which is really being kind and gentle towards yourself. The other component would be this theme of common humanity, or this realization that, these struggles, they're part of the normal human existence and that we're not alone in them. And then really then practicing mindful awareness of our emotions, of our thoughts and feelings, the way we're talking to ourselves, the way we regulate and manage our emotions. And really trying to talk to ourselves the way maybe we would a valued friend, which I think is sometimes a really difficult pattern to unlearn.
I like that last example a great deal, talking to your valued friend, because often we're so much nicer, or I'd like to believe we're so nice to other people. And that's in some ways, as we entered into this conversation, why I think self-compassion is challenging. Because we're not necessarily good at putting ourselves first or holding ourselves out in a certain way that we value ourselves.
Absolutely. Sometimes we call that kind of like a case of the yeah, buts. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, yeah, but they really do mean well, like I know that I'm a bad person, or yeah, but they are really going through a hard time. I should be able to manage what I'm dealing with, right? So we're really holding ourselves to a different standard and sometimes some unrealistic expectations that we wouldn't hold another person to, especially someone we love and care about.
Well, why would you say, as a clinician, why is it so difficult for us to practice this way of being, self-compassion?
Well, some of it is because it might be a pattern that we've been doing for a really long time. Maybe it's something we've learned, this pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of feedback that maybe we got as a child through culture or through our parents or, our own upbringing. Some of it can be, maybe just increased stress at work or at school and the expectations that others have for us. And we're really trying to keep up with that. So continuing to put those stressors on ourselves, it continues to create this negative narrative or pattern in our head, that negative self-talk that kind of becomes this ongoing loop of negative talk about ourselves. And it becomes pervasive, right? So it's not maybe just about this situation anymore. It's about truly who I am as a person. And that really then seeps into everywhere in our lives.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of like practical ways that we could bring that through. I understand how difficult it is. I understand those benefits, but how do we actually practically move forward? How do we operationalize this whole self-compassion thing?
So I think really concretely, some of the steps that we take, we want to think broadly, first of all, about, like you said, mindfulness, paying attention to our inner thoughts, our inner feelings, maybe judgments that are coming up. So sometimes we can concretely do that by speaking out loud when we're talking to ourselves instead of talking kind of in our head. Sometimes that narrative goes unnoticed a little bit more. I've encouraged patients to maybe set a timer or set a reminder on their phone that pops up and says, what were you just thinking about? And to kind of stop yourself in your tracks and say, wait a minute, what was I thinking about? How was I talking to myself? How was I perceiving myself in what I'm doing right now? Was it positive or negative? And if it is negative, really challenging yourself to reframe that either in a positive or more factual, non-judgmental way. Other ways we can do that are, of course, journaling, kind of stream of consciousness, and then going back to it and really seeing what we're saying and talking to ourselves about, recognizing things that we're grateful for, ways to kind of balance out some of the negatives that maybe we have on this constant loop in our mind to really better create this practice of more positive self-talk and more positive perception or engagement in the world around us.
My sense is the more we practice some of these things, like a mindfulness practice, the more we do it, then the more natural, the more ingrained that it becomes. So it's that repetition. What is there any like collectives that support you in this? I mean, obviously in a clinical practice, one-on-one therapy, there's opportunities to develop and practice with accountability, self-compassion. I'm just trying to think of where else, you mentioned journaling, where else is there in community to come together in a self-compassionate way?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned, Dr. Kristen Neff, she is a great resource and has a lot of resources on her website, which is, let me get it right, it is self-compassion.org. And she has one of her books, Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. She has collaborated on a few workbooks. So those are great places to start. There is also a course if you're interested in having a more structured approach to this on her website. And then, some of the more common things we think about, maybe like some of the apps that are, provided, in the App Store that have practices of mindfulness each day. And those can be some really great ways to just implement some of these slowing down practices for a brief period of time each day. And that helps us really, mindfulness helps us slow down where we're at in our physical time and space, but it also slows down our mind and our thoughts in a way where we can better recognize like what's going on for me right now. How am I feeling? What is the stream of consciousness in my thoughts? What am I saying to myself or about the world around me?
Yeah, that's a critical one. I think, that self-talk can go a lot of different directions. And so if we're aware or mindful of kind of the content or the tenor of that, I know for me, when I'm stressed or feeling like I'll kind of beat myself up a little bit. And then when I recognize it, I just, I'll come with a mantra of I'm doing the best I can.
Yes.
We're good at giving everyone else the benefit of the doubt, but we don't necessarily give ourselves that benefit of the doubt, which is really, an aspect of compassion. But really just if I acknowledge I can only do the best that I can do, it gives me permission then just to show up as I am, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think that's you practicing self-compassion right there. That's a perfect example of I'm doing the best I can. It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. And I think what I love that you just said is really giving yourself permission. I think sometimes one of the biggest barriers to self-compassion is feeling like, oh, well, all of a sudden self-compassion is going to turn into self-pity, or, it's going to push me to not really do anything. And, worrying about that slippery slope. So really recognizing that, it is not the same as self-indulgence or self-pity. We're not feeling bad for ourselves or avoiding responsibility. We're really actually trying to take time to recognize that we can't run on an empty tank. And it actually takes a lot of courage and vulnerability, strength to be able to say, I need a break right now so I can better care for myself and those around me.
I like what you said, because I think whenever we're talking about ourselves, there's always that concern: are we being indulgent? Are we being egotistical? Are we being even narcissistic? And so if you were to offer me kind of the distinction between and I don't know if there is, between self-love and self-compassion, to me, it's all like taking care of yourself.
I think that's a good question. I think that they could be interchangeable. I mean, the biggest thing that comes up for me is thinking about how probably self-compassion is such a broad concept that I think it includes self-love, but it also includes a lot of other things, right? Like just self-care, or, making sure that we are holding ourselves to a standard, right? By maybe not being overly indulgent, but also recognizing that it's important that we do take time to slow down and to be present and to really make sure we're taking care of ourselves.
Dr. Matchmay, that's a beautiful statement that you just said there, to slow down and take care of ourselves. I think I recognize when I'm coming from a better place of, attending to myself, I seem to be nicer to other people. The people that I love and that are in my life, it's, I'm in a better place. And often the flip can be, if I'm tough on myself, I, might be projecting that out to those that are closest to me. And so I appreciate the statement. Anything that you'd like to offer just in closing on our topic of self-compassion?
I will just say that if you have any interest in learning more about self-compassion and you're really struggling to cultivate that practice on your own, one of the ways that you can do that is by reaching out for support, and that may include reaching out for therapy. We have several lovely programs at Short Mesa Vista Hospital, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with someone who could be appropriate for you.
Hey, you're such a phenomenal resource. Sharp Mesa Vista is an excellent mental health resource in the community. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Dr. Matchmay, thank you for being with us today, offering your perspective, your expertise. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan.